Dear esteemed Rector Magnificus, dear esteemed Dean, dear valued guests en students, lieve familie en vrienden. Maar het is ontzettend leuk dat jullie hier zijn voor mij vandaag. As you know from the invitation, the title of my lecture is Learn or Lose, and you probably expect to learn something today. Now, most scientists agree that if you think about pure lectures, when somebody just reads for an hour, are not necessarily that effective from a learning perspective. A lot of research is done on learning among students. And if you look at students, if you start with a lecture, basically, and again, a pure lecture where you're reading text, what could happen easily is that, attention span goes up at the beginning, hopefully like today, but then it declines sharply. And then at the end of a lecture, the attention span might go up because people start thinking about a coffee break, or perhaps the professor is talking about what will be covered in the exam. And I know my son always mentions this to me. In preparation for this lecture, I challenged myself and I said, you know what? I want to make sure that you will learn something new today. Hopefully you will be intellectually challenged. And also I hope that my lecture will be an inspiration for you as well. So I hope this will be the attention span that you will experience. So what can you expect? I will take you on a journey, learn or lose. And I will end my lecture to talk about my chair and about my research. Now, when I was preparing for my lecture and I had my first try out, I basically spent about 3 hours to go through this booklet that you will receive as a present, as a personal present at the end of the lecture. So I figured out I have to cut back significantly, otherwise, we won't leave here until late tonight. So let me start with disruption ahead. So I want to start with the impact on technologies on people and organizations. And I want to turn to my family members first. And I will switch for a moment in Dutch. Beste Van Dam familieleden. Het is een enorme trots dat ik vandaag de tweede generatie ben die hier op Nyenrode, in de gemeente Nyenrode-Breukelen, gaat werken. Onze overgrootvader, Matthijs, was toen al 200 jaar geleden een zelfstandige zonder personeel en zonder pensioen, die hier eigenlijk werkte in deze gemeente. Matthijs had een familie van 8 kinderen. En als je kunt voorstellen, dat was 6, 7 dagen per week heel hard werken om te zorgen dat iedereen wat te eten kreeg. Now I will switch back in English. So for my American friends and English friends, I just explained that my granddad, Matthijs van Dam, lived here 200 years ago. And he worked in the agriculture and basically he had 8 kids and he had to work very, very long days. But I'm proud to be the second generation to work actually in this township. So Matthijs lived at times of tremendous change. He lived at the beginning of the first industrial revolution in Britain. A revolution that brought a lot of new technologies actually. Think about the steam engine that had a huge impact on mechanization. This revolution was followed by the second industrial revolution. It's also called the technological revolution. This revolution brought mass production and rapid industrialization. And this revolution was followed by the third industrial revolution. Started in the 70s with the entrance of computers, the mainframes. Some of my former old colleagues from Nixdorf, we remember those days. Mainframes, mini computers, personal computing in the 80s, and the internet in the 90s. And if you reflect on those 3 industrial revolutions, there's one common theme. That's basically that jobs have been changing significantly and have been reshuffled, and people had to educate and deploy themselves significantly to make sure that they found a new job. Today, we are at the beginning of the 4th industrial revolution. And in this industrial revolution, there's a whole suite of new technologies that will be deployed. Think about robotization, the Internet of Things, cloud computing, the mobile internet, artificial intelligence, just to name a few. And it's expected that the technologies that will be deployed over the next decades will have a tremendous impact on employment and on organizations. And also what's interesting is that the speed of technology breakthroughs have been speeding up. Think about the first phone call was made in 1876. It took about 515 years before the first website was launched. And another 16 years before the iPhone arrived. Think about it, that's only 9 years ago. In terms of robotics, the Jenny was a robot deployed during the first industrial revolution in Britain. It was a weaving machine. And it took about 200 years before General Motors started deploying robots in their plants in the United States. Another 48 years until Google launched its first robot, the Sharp. 3D printing. Printing press, 1448. The computer printer, 1953. And then 31 years later, we see the 3D printer used in organizations. What's also interesting is that the adoption of new technologies is also accelerating. Think about the time it takes to reach 50 million people. For the radio, 38 years. 13 years for the TV. 4 years for the iPod. The internet, 3 years. 1 year for Facebook. Twitter, just 9 months. Angry Birds, 35 days. And thanks to all of you, Pokemon Go, 14 days. Now, if you look at different applications of technologies, and some of you know, I have worked for a long time in the sport retail store of my dad and of my uncle, Kees, selling Adidas shoes when I was 12, 13, 14 years old. So I always follow, retail and particularly Adidas. And Adidas, it took Adidas 12 weeks with 6 people to have a prototype of a shoe. Today, it only takes them 2 weeks with 2 people to do the same thing. The Sydney Airport, not sure if you've been there recently, they are using face recognition software that will help you to basically check in at customs, help you with baggage handling and going through customs. In Japan, a new hotel has been opened, manned by robots. A multilingual robot will greet you when you come in and help you to check in. And then the robot will help you also with your luggage, and you can decide to basically store it, or the robot will bring it to your room. Amazon has just started piloting a whole new services in the United States where they basically can deliver packages within 30 minutes after ordering them in your garden at home. And last but not least, you all have read and seen a lot about autonomous cars. Uber has started a pilot in September this year, where basically people are picked up in Pittsburgh and brought to their destination. Now you might say, Uber, why Uber? And what's interesting about Uber? Well, if you think about Uber, they have taxis, driven by independent folks, zelfstandigen zonder personeel. And there are currently more than 1 million people who are driving Uber cars. And now Uber is already piloting an autonomous car. Think about the impact over time. Now I'd like to show you a very brief video about another invention, pretty recently.
No, this isn't a runaway truck, and no, it's not an outtake from the action movie Speed. This is a conventional 18-wheeler that drives itself, thanks to a $30,000 retrofit. San Francisco startup Otto, which Uber bought this summer, made history with this truck. It completed the world's first truck autonomous delivery, carrying 50,000 cans of Budweiser from a brewery in Fort Collins, Colorado, to Colorado Springs, 120 miles away. The human drove the truck onto the highway, flipped on self-driving mode, and spent the next 2 hours of interstate chilling in the back seat. Autonomous cars may get all the buzz, but teaching trucks to drive themselves could deliver major economic and safety benefits. With 3 million drivers in the US, trucks carry 70% of American freight. But there still aren't nearly enough human drivers to do the job. Most new drivers quit within a year. And because you people can't stop buying stuff online, demand is only going to go up, and that shortage will just get worse. And roughly 400,000 trucks crash every year, killing about 4,000 people, and costing the economy billions of dollars. Human error is nearly always to blame. Otto says the solution is a robot that doesn't get tired, angry, drunk, or distracted.
So we're able to perceive everything, we're able to act faster, and as a result, we're able to make that truck driver monitoring the system and the act of driving much safer.
So think about this, the impact on jobs and organizations. Now, Yale professor Richard Foster has looked at the impact of technologies and changing markets on the lifespan of the most prestigious companies. The companies listed on the S&P 500 index. And he discovered that companies who were on the index in 1935, they had a 90-year lifespan. Companies in 55, only 45 years. In 75, 30 years. In 2015, he expects only 15 years. And in 2027, only 13 years. Now, it doesn't mean that necessarily all these companies will go to the graveyard. Some will merge, they will split, they will be acquired, or indeed, they will disappear. In the next session of my lecture, I like to talk about the impact of technologies on jobs and skills. Two professors from MIT published this book last year, and they stated that this is the best time for people who have special skills and the right education, but this is also the worst time for people who have ordinary skills or basically don't have the right education, because robots and computers are acquiring these skills at an extraordinary rate. Now, many economists have predicted in the past widespread unemployment. Think about John Maynard Keynes, David Ricardo. They all said that, technology will have a huge impact on unemployment around the world. And they were partly wrong. And the reason is that first, computers supplemented a lot of work that was done by people. Secondly, has been an increase in productivity. And third, also a lot of technology basically will create new jobs. Now, a lot of people suggest that this whole new generation of technologies that will be deployed during the fourth industrial revolution will indeed have a significant impact on jobs that have never been touched. Now, a study from Oxford in the United States on the impact of technologies shows that a number of jobs are very likely to disappear over the next decades. Think about telemarketers, accountants. Think about the impact of machine learning, learning algorithms, retail people. If you buy online, the more we buy online, the less people we need in stores. Technical writers, real estate sales agents, word processing and typists, machinists, economists. And I have good news for my dentist, Jan Mentrop. I'm not sure if Jan is here today. Is Jan here today? Yeah, Jan is there. So Jan, you will be fine. Your retirement looks pretty good. And Jan and I have been talking about robotization every time when I have spent time with him. Even yesterday, actually, we were talking about it. Another study from the World Economic Forum predicts also that a number of jobs will disappear over the next 5 years. They basically say that if you look on the left side here, everything in red, that's about 7 million jobs. And the study is about 15 countries, emerging and developed countries, excluding China. And on the right, you see job creation, about 2 million jobs. So the net is basically 5 million jobs will disappear. And if you look at management on the right side, basically I talk here about people in management roles who have deep expertise in something, not just generic knowledge. Another study done on activities that people do. So basically, what kind of activities do people do? And then the question is, what is the likelihood that you can automate a specific activity? Now, if you look at this slide, on the low end and on the left hand, managing others, very difficult to robotize, right? But if you think about on the right hand, predictable physical work has a very highly chance to get automated over the next decades. Now let me show you a very short brief video about a new invention in the United States, what might have a huge impact on the food industry. The catch-up is still the challenge, right? So now some more data on the impact of technology. I have a couple of more reports. A report which says basically that the vulnerable jobs due to automation range between 45 and 60%. If you look at Dutch data, the Sociaal Planbureau predicts that a couple of industries will highly likely see a huge reduction still in people, financial services, and people who work in industry. ING, based on an ING report, they suggest that employers in the Netherlands, for employers, that 22% of jobs might disappear. But employees are more negative. They expect that it will be 37%. And the most optimistic report I found was from the OECD, and they think that only 10% of the jobs in the Netherlands are at risk of automation. Now, if you reflect on this, on all the reports, there are some differences. Basically, if you pull it all together, there are reports which state, jobs will go away between 10% and 50%. Then there's a difference in terms of timing, short term, medium term, longer term. There are differences in terms of country. Japan is an example versus the Netherlands. So a number of differences. However, most people agree that indeed there is significant change ahead of us. Now, what are the implications for skills and for the development of people? The World Economic Forum looked at a number of skill sets. And basically they predicted that there are 10 skill sets very hot by 2020. The first one is complex problem solving. It is expected that 1 out of 3 jobs will require complex problem solving. Social skills, the orange here, will be needed in 1 out of 5 jobs. The fastest growing need is the competency creativity. And if you reflect on it, creativity has everything to do with innovation, right? The more creative people you have, they can think about how you can do things differently in your organization. And last but not least, the EU, basically they have done research and they are telling us that basically 90% of the workforce needs digital skills. 90%, so that's the biggest competency. And unfortunately, there are about 40% of the people who do not have the right level of digital skills. In addition to this, the World Economic Forum also predicts that by 2020, about 30% of the core skill set of people, what is required, are currently not required in existing jobs. Now, what we have seen during the different industrial revolutions, and again, what we will see now, is that there will be a lot of new emerging jobs and future jobs, as you see on the slide. App developers is an example. 10 years ago, the job app developer did not exist. Today, there are 10 million app developers. You think about a professional triber. In Hollywood, if they make a movie, there's a person, basically a professional triber, who identifies what kind of people he needs to make a movie. People who design costumes, the actors, etc. And he or she will pull the whole team together. And after the project is over, people go back and they find something else. So a professional triber is also a role that is expected that will be a future role in organizations. And then drone instructors. There are in the United States already 6-7 colleges where you can take a master or bachelor degree to become a drone instructor. A whole new job that people can employ in. Now I like to talk about lifelong learning. If you think about all the changes ahead of us, the changes in the workforce, huge reshuffling of jobs over the next 2 decades, how well are we doing in development? Lifelong learning is motivated by pension, by time of retirement. Now, Linda Gretton, a researcher from London Business School, has done pretty extensive research and published a book this year actually, where she basically predicts that people who are born in 2007 have a 50% chance to become 100 years or older because of advancement in technology. We will be better in treatment of aging diseases, better education, you name it. Now, if you think about a 100-year life, and let me do the math together on this one. So, if you want to retire at 50% of your latest income, and currently, I think in the Netherlands, it's something like between 55 and 70. But let's assume it's 50%. And let's assume that you will save 10% of your annual income over your life. Your retirement age is in your early 80s. Early 80s. My son Yannick, who's sitting over there, he didn't know that I would say something about him, but always need to have a surprise, right? So basically, he's 19 years old. And I looked up on the Dutch the government website his retirement age. It is 71 and 6 months. And there's a disclaimer that basically, if life expectancy continues to go up, your retirement date will go up. So basically, Yannick, it looks like you will not retire until you are 75. And that means you will be in the workforce for 50 years. 50 years where you have the opportunity to continue develop your skills over time. I ask you to bring your iPhone, or to look at your iPhone. If you can participate in a poll, I'd like to get your perspective on this question. How would you rate lifelong learning in the Netherlands between 1 and 10? And basically text a number if you've already took SMS, you had an SMS message to this number actually, to number 447624, etc. And then just key in 1 to 9. Let me see what kind of, how you think about lifelong learning in the Netherlands. Okay, polls are still coming in. Too close to call. Well, okay, so let's just reflect on this. So basically, we are not necessarily on the high end here. 7, 7, 6, you know. You see the percentages. Okay, so let me take you through a scorecard that I have developed. A scorecard for the Netherlands on lifelong learning. And I have a couple of performance indicators. First is that 22%, only 22% of employees have completed a study or earned a certificate over the last 3 years. And if you look at more vulnerable groups of people, people have low education, people are unemployed, people are older, even the percentage is still significantly lower. There's a 22% decline of the number of people over age 30 who participated in an HBO-WO study, an academic study. A decline. This is also pretty kind of interesting. Only 20% of temporary employees and 37% of self-employed workers participated in any kind of formal learning. And that's basically the group of people who rely on their skill set to do work in the future. Right? So if you are ZZP'er, you are only hired if you have a valuable skill set. 18% of, if you look at companies in the Netherlands, they spend between €500 and €1,500 on formal learning and development. And what's interesting is that there's an underspending of 18%. So companies are not using their training and development budgets to develop their people. This is the most daunting statistic that I found. 62% of people, they say that they learn nothing or just a little bit by doing their job. 18% of the Dutch population participated in education and training. This is the EU, and the EU is using this as a grade to look at basically the lifelong learning status in the country. So if you look at who is doing really well in this, it's Finland, Norway, and Switzerland. 16% of people in the Dutch workforce participate in any kind of program outside of their daily work. So if you say, what kind of learning do you do outside of your daily work? Only 16%. Again, very low. And the Netherlands dropped 4 places on the 2015 World Economic Forum list ranking on basically level of education and skills, as well as on the employment available to people. Also, we are going down. So if you reflect on the grades for the Netherlands, it's pretty daunting, actually. Now I want to ask you a personal question. If you reflect on this yourself, and I'm wondering how many of you give yourself a grade 8 or higher for lifelong learning? How many people say, I'm an 8 or higher in lifelong learning? Wow, okay, all my friends, I know it, all my friends. I've done already a pretty good job over dinners over the last couple of years. Wonderful. Okay, now I'm going to my favorite Norwegian artist, Edvard Munch. Learn or lose, Frederik. And, you know, there is really a need for both companies and for individuals to make a big change. A call to action for companies to really embrace lifelong learning practices. There is a very strong business case for the investments in learning and development. Now, if you look at this statistic here, 85% of the market value of the S&P 500 is the result of intangible assets. And basically, intangible assets are to a large extent people, right? There are many metrics which shows that companies who invest in the top of in their leaders and they are performing in the high quartile, they are outperforming other organizations by factor 2 to 3 on earnings. A good friend of mine, he's a venture capitalist in Boston. And he starts investing at $10 million. And I spent time with him and I asked him, how do you decide on where to invest the 10+ million, in what kind of company? And he said to me, Nick, there are only 3 criteria. 1, people, 2, people, and 3, people. Because a business plan is just a driver's license, the minute that the ink is dry, the world has changed, there are competitors, there are different other things happening in the market. So basically it's all about, do you have the right team to be successful in driving a company? And finally, it took McKinsey about 50 years to figure this out, right? So people before strategy. And they published an article this summer in the Harvard Business Review, and McKinsey will publish a book on this topic in 2017. Now, a number of organizations have launched over the years so-called corporate academies, corporate universities, basically to support capability building. Now, one example is Steve Jobs, the Apple University. When Steve got pretty sick, Apple realized that he has been such a unique person and they have a very special culture, that in order to retain that, they needed to capture basically all these insights, best practices, and make sure that they could develop a culture where people were, applying a number of these principles. So Apple hired a dean from a business school in the United States, and they launched their Apple University. So many examples here of different universities. And based on my research that I did last year with Jackie Bressy, who's also somewhere in the room here, on corporate academies among many organizations, what we see is that there are a lot of organizations who are increasing their investments in L&D, but also they are modernizing and professionalizing learning and development. So let me show you a very short video from McKinsey in terms of how McKinsey looks at learning in the 21st century.
The world is changing significantly and at an unprecedented pace. Client demands are greater and expectations of our people are increasing. Given this, we must continue to evolve.
Oh, this is kind of the risk if I walk up and I start shaking hands with people. Let me see if we can do this again.
The world is changing significantly and at an unprecedented pace. Client demands are greater and expectations of our people are increasing. Given this, we must continue to evolve how we develop our people. McKinsey Learning is innovating and transforming as a leader in the L&D profession in the 21st century. But what is 21st century learning? Did you know millennials check their smartphone on average 43 times per day? What if McKinsey's learning development met our learners where they are? 21st century learning is personalized. From ordering our coffee to our weather and news apps to entertainment, personalized learning involves approach, curriculum, and learning environments tailored by learners and for learners to meet their different needs and aspirations. Learning that is personalized needs to be self-directed, relevant, journey-focused, and strengths-based. With 100 billion neurons and half a quadrillion connections in the brain, what if McKinsey leveraged brain science to build its learning programs? 21st century learning is scientific. Learning works when it changes behaviors. The latest scientific research on how the brain learns, including cognitive science, neuroscience, psychology, and other mind-brain sciences, is defining how to increase retention and application of learning. Scientific learning must be evidence-based and delivered via learning nuggets. It must be engaging and memorable, informed by well-being, and improved by analytics and measurements. And finally, consider the digital reality of today, where only 10% of learning happens through formal learning. What if McKinsey's learning was available everywhere? 21st century learning is connected. Today, learning occurs anywhere and anytime in collaboration with a network of friends and colleagues that share common interests. It draws on the power of today's digital technology to fuse people's passions and individual and collective experiences across generations. It fosters common purpose and innovative insight. Connected learning is boundless and social. McKinsey has the opportunity to play an instrumental role in creating an environment where our colleagues can keep learning and growing at an extraordinary rate, thereby achieving a level of client impact and personal fulfillment that is today nearly unimaginable. 21st century learning is the future and will set the pace for learning and development. This is Learning at McKinsey.
So many organizations I'm talking with, they are professionalizing learning. If you think about formal learning is only 34 to 44 hours per person in an organization and can be delivered through a classroom experience, but also there are many other digital methods, like you see on this slide here. In discussion with many organizations and also based on research, it's clear that the classroom will not go away. I can tell you a little anecdote about Deloitte, where I've been for quite some time. And at Deloitte, we did a study among millennials and asked ourselves the question: what are the things that millennials want in the future? Do they just want to live? Do they just want to learn digitally, or do they also still value a classroom experience? And that became very obvious. They want to be together with other people, learn from other people, spend time with leaders, etc. But the classroom is changing. It is transformed. What organizations do in a classroom today looks more like working. So having simulations in a classroom, as an example. But also finding time for reflection. Also, a lot of leaders tell us that they are so busy from 8 to late that they have no time to reflect on themselves, what they do. They have no time to read a one-page article. They hardly find time to basically watch a couple of minutes video. They need to find time to reflect, and that happens typically in a learning environment. But in addition to this, there's a tremendous opportunity outside of formal learning. As I mentioned, only 62% of people are saying that they are learning nothing or just a little bit on the job. That's where I believe there's a tremendous opportunity to turn the learning, the workplace into a learning place. There are many kind of different learning solutions that you can use. If you look at this bar here, and as you probably also reflect on your own career, people learn by doing something new, by moving into a new role. By basically trying something new out, by moving to a new organization. Basically what happens is people are moving outside of their comfort zone into your learning zone. And that's where people learn. Then on-demand learning. Learning where you have access to information, knowledge at your fingertips. Using the iPhone, the smartphone, where you basically find things out, learn about everything in your organization. And was already mentioned in the video, social learning. Basically, all learning is social. People learn from each other. If you look at Harvard research among students, it shows that students who work in small teams, who learn in teams, are better prepared, they learn more, and they perform better. Now, let me go to the other side of the coin. It's not just about organizations, what they need to change. Also, people need to change. And I have developed 6 distinctive mindsets. Mindsets, and I will skip this poll, mindsets for the lifelong learner. The first one is focus on growth, and I will talk about it in a second. Then become a serial master. Stretch, and I will not talk about it today, you will find it in my booklet. Build your personal brand and network. Again, I will talk about it in my booklet. Own your development journey. and do what you love. And find your and discover your Ikigai. Now let's start with growth. A lot of people always wonder if you can develop people, and also answering the question, is IQ static or not? In 1932, research was done among close to 80,000 Scottish kids, children 11 years old. And all of them did an IQ test. And the test was repeated 60 to 70 years later among 500 people who were still part of that group. Now what's interesting is you might expect that if you repeat the test and let's say you have an IQ score, if you are 11 years old, of 100, that basically it will also be 100 if you are 80 years old. Now, if you look at the research data, and each dot represents basically one person, what you see on this data is that there are people like, let me take this person over here. He had an IQ score of 110 at age of 11 years. But at age 80, he had about an IQ score of 60, so a decline. So all the red dots are basically people where their IQ score dropped. Now, if you look at research data, the reason for that is typically health and mental issues or lifestyle. Then the good news is that if you look at the green dots, this person, an IQ of 65, later on had an IQ of close to 80. So all the green dots are people who have developed their IQ. Now, in average, we have seen an increase in IQ for the whole population. And many other research studies have confirmed that yes, you can develop people and you can increase their IQ. Now, a professor from Stanford, Carol Dweck, has done over the last 30 years pretty extensive research on learning. And her conclusion is that the way that people think about their learning, has a huge impact on their learning capacity and how much they learn. And she talks about two different mindsets. You have people with a fixed mindset who basically tell themselves, you know, my potential is limited based on my genes, based on my socioeconomic status, and basically, so growth opportunities will not be, will not be for me. People with a growth mindset are basically telling themselves, my potential is unlimited, my potential is unknown, and I can continue to develop myself in my life. And based on the mindset that you have, people have different beliefs. So as an example, people who have a fixed mindset, if they think about challenges, they try to avoid them. If they think about obstacles, they give up. If they think effort, it's unpleasant to spend more and more time on things. If they get some feedback, they take it personal and become defensive and don't do anything to improve it. And if they look at success of others, they are threatened by others who are successful. Versus people who have a growth mindset, they embrace challenges. They persist if there are obstacles. They see effort as a way to mastery. Criticism is a way to improve yourself. And success of others is basically a source of inspiration. Now I like to take you through a second mindset for our learners. Linda Gretton again did research and she published a book called The Shift. And she said that basically the time in our time where people have access to Wikipedia at their smartphones, the future is all about specialization. In other words, she's saying the time of the shallow generalist is over. And a career where basically take my son again, 50 years ahead of him, where you can say, hey, I completed 1 degree when I was in my 20s, and I will just develop some skills over my lifetime, you probably won't make the finish line anymore. So I believe that we are moving away from the T shape to an M shape. And what's the M shape? Is basically a career model where, and I've taken an example here, if you, in your 20s, you get a master degree in journalism, then you might specialize in financial journalism, and then you go back and you get a degree in business economics. And because of technology is changing all the time, it's part of everybody's job. You need to continue to take classes and learn about the technologies that are important for your role. So basically, a lifelong learner, and then in addition to that, there are a number of skills on the top, broad skills, that are continue to be very important. The third mindset is stretching. I mentioned already that people develop themselves when they stretch. And I'd like to introduce a development model called the S-curve. And the S-curve is basically a model where you see here on the horizontal X time in years. And here you see from low to high impact on business and personal fulfillment. And basically what happens is, and also reflect on it yourself, if you have moved into a new role in an organization, or you moved into a different role in an organization, what typically happens is that you are at the beginning of your S-curve, basically a moment that you have to learn a lot. Everything is new, everything is different. And basically your impact is not right away, terrific. You also don't feel necessarily, I'm doing extremely well. But basically then after a while, you hit an acceleration here. You feel like, yes, I'm mastering what I'm doing. I'm really into my groove. And then basically you see a whole acceleration with a huge impact on business and also personal fulfillment. Now, what happens typically after that? If people are in a role over time, what they do become habits, and they are not necessarily challenged anymore that much. Their learning is limited, and basically as a consequence, they are flattening out. Some people will their performance start going down, and as a consequence, they are leaving an organization. Now, what I suggest is that basically people have to go through different S-curves in their life. Every time you feel like, hey, I'm at the end of my S-curve, what are the next things I should do? And if you move into a new role, you typically go down a little bit in your performance. That's fine, because you will learn again a lot. But you go through different S-curves. The last mindset I like to discuss is the mindset, I think, used by Steve Jobs a lot in different videos. I think if you reflect on our working lives, if we work in organizations for 40, 50 years, and we spend so much time in the workforce, we should rather do something that we like, right? Because otherwise, what's the point? Now, there is a concept in Japan, Ikigai, a concept in Japan that means the reason for living, the reason to wake up every day. And this concept, to discover that in your life, will you have to take through a number of questions, reflections, and then hopefully you will get there. So basically, it starts with what would you love to do? And then what does the world need? A lot of millennials are asking way more questions about meaning and purpose than ever before. I know in my firm, McKinsey, we get phones from people who are graduating and they're asking us, what are you guys doing to make the world a better place? Because what's the point just working for a consulting firm? So the intersection is your mission. Then the question is, we need to make a paycheck. What are we paid for? Or what can we be paid for? And the intersection is there, your vocation. In Dutch, your roeping. Then what are you good at? What are your strengths? What are your talents? And the intersections are your profession and basically your passion. And then in the middle, you'll find, your ikigai. Well, of course, you reflect on this like, oh, Nick, this sounds simple. And it's not. But I can recommend you to read a book. It's a book published by a couple of professors from the design school at Stanford. It's called Design Your Life. And this Design Your Life book will help you with using the methodology of design thinking to explore what you really want to do in your life. And let me show you a video.
沖縄には生きがいという言葉があります。毎朝起きる原動力を与えてくれるものだと思います。
目覚まし本当に遠くに投げ捨てようかなと思う時もあるんだけど、我慢して自分のお尻に鞭を打って起きて走りに行きます。
踊りの竜舞道場に通っている生徒たちの成長を見るため。
そうですね、私の生きがいは、いつも馬に会いに行くために、仕事をしに行きながら、責任を持って人と馬とも接していっていますね。
お客さんがね、喜んでもらえたら一番嬉しいんだけど。
いや、自分には兄弟もいないし、この孫たちがたくさんいて、たまには孫たちが寄ってくるさね。もう本当これが生きがいである。
世界チャンピオンになりたいんだって、俺はなるんだって、家族のために、チームのために、自分自身のためにということが生きがいですね。
家族があったり友達がいたりいて、みんなに助けられてこいつのために助けたいとか、それを国も思わずできたり、仕事も目標があってそれに対しての勉強や努力は全然疲れない、苦にならない現状のことじゃないですかね。一日楽しむために起きてます。
沖縄では、ハッピー毎日が、幸せであればそれで生きがい。
Yeah, there's a place that longevity of life is the longest in the entire world. I don't think just because of this, but also because of food and other things, but nevertheless, it's... Okay, in conclusion, my great-great-granddad, Matthijs, who worked actually, as I mentioned, long days. We have seen in the Netherlands and also in the United States that the work week has declined in the 50s and 60s from 6 days to 5 days, and now for a lot of people even, 32 days. So basically, more music. So if I reflect on the changes actually in the fourth industrial revolution, the huge need for upskilling and reskilling, I believe that individuals need to start embracing lifelong learning mindsets. People need to invest more time, personal time and money in education. For companies, they need to embrace lifelong learning practices. They need to make sure that they turn the workplace in a learning place, and for all, not for a few. There's a huge need to modernize and professionalize L&D. And, increased investments are needed to make sure that everybody will, can continue to grow and develop. And there's a huge business case to support this. From the government, I expect that they do a much better job in educating people about the importance of lifelong learning. I think they also should provide way more tax incentives for both companies and individuals. And in addition to that, they should prepare people in education programs for not the jobs of today, but for jobs of the future. Now I like to close with my chair briefly. I know I'm running out of time here almost. I will continue do research on a number of areas. Obviously lifelong learning and lifelong learning practices. Learning strategy and corporate academies. Design of learning, because what we know from a lot of research that only 34% of learning interventions are successful in changing behaviors of people. Learning transfer and learning effectiveness is of course key to explore. And last but not least, adult development. What can organizations do to unleash the potential of people? From a teaching perspective, next year we will start a masterclass learning and leadership development at Nyenrode. This is an English class for international L&D professionals who like to basically lift their skills. This will become a very immersive experience. It's blended. We are using CLO coaches from around the world who will coach participants. We will support classroom learning with digital assets, so there will be a true blended learning program. And also there will be a lot of assignments that people are working on the job. And also we will ask them to create basically knowledge that can be shared with the learning community. In addition to that, I will teach other classes and give guest lectures on overall people development, leading high-performing teams, being a consultant, what that takes. And also with my friend Jackie, we are working on workshops on authentic confidence. A topic that we believe is a huge potential unlocker for organizations. With that, I have said, ik heb gezegd.
Thank you very much, Professor Van Dam, for your amazing lecture. And ladies and gentlemen, may I please have your attention for Professor Misha Julovic, Rector Magnificus of Nyenrode Business University.
Thank you. Thank you. Dear Professor Nick Van Dam, dear faculty friends, ladies and gentlemen, there is one moment in the professional life of a professor where no comments or criticism is allowed, and that is the moment during the inaugural lecture. So, after this moment, by the way, it's common, at least within the academy, to be confronted almost continuously with the so-called friendly fire from your colleagues. So I'm a little bit reluctant to speak, but I allow myself to do so because simply Nick asked me to. And since we all know that after 60 minutes of lecturing, only one thing is in our mind, the borrelhapjes, I will be brief. I have no comments, no suggestions, better concept, but some gentle observations, if you allow me to do so. The lecture initially focuses on the velocity of change, and this is mostly caused by increasing technology, as we have been explained, very often metaphorically pictured by change in transportation from a horse to an airplane. But while this all happened, our body didn't change at all. We are still the same, and although we travel faster, there is still no cure for a jet lag. Our thoughts have the same speed as in the 19th and the 18th century. We remained what we have been 1,000 years ago, despite all the technology. We simply remained human beings. So the question is, how important is that change if we remain the same? This trend, not to change at all, despite technological innovation, can be seen every year during the summer. Let me explain. Personally, I feel that the supermarket is a great innovation in our lives. Everything is there all the time. If you want flowers, well, it's so cold that even the grass doesn't grow, you can buy it. Strawberries in February, no problem. Brie from Argentina, peanuts, and indeed peanuts and many other exotic stuff is available the whole year through. And despite this, we still have a summer holiday in our university. Why? Because about 1,000 years ago, when university and schools started, the students and teachers had to work on the farm during the summer. No need for that anymore. We have supermarkets, skip the summer holiday, let's keep on working. Continuous education, I would say, but somehow I don't dare to touch the subject during the new collective labor agreement. So no real change there. And when there is change, it feels very often a little bit familiar. The disappearance of lifetime employment makes the employee the only constant, causing a huge boom of the so-called modern-day laborers, ZZP'ers, resembling very much Matthijs van Dam in the 18th century. It looks like I'm trying to rename the chapter called Disruption Ahead into Repetition Ahead. That's not the case. I realize that the ZZP of today is not the same as the day laborer in the 18th century. Jobs evaluate, they come, they disappear. It's changing all the time, and that is what the next part of the lecture was all about. The future of jobs. Many interesting ideas can be found this in this booklet that you will get later on. I really recommend it. And some hidden contradictions that we can think about and try to solve. We learn that it's unknown, for instance, what the future jobs will look like. On the other hand, the chapter is full of all kind of predictions about appearance and disappearance of jobs. And there's some disturbing vision presented that accountancy will be completely replaced by artificial intelligence. I don't know really what to think about, but it doesn't sound that bad, does it? Coming back to the human nature, I wonder what our nature will do with all these technology changes. If I just look at the recent history of the gaming industry, I see that the technologically complex game rolled out in no time all over the world at the end appealed to the simple human instinct of hunting and gathering, in this case of non-existing creatures called Pokemons. My point is that an avalanche of new technology doesn't have to be translated into unexpected human behavior. One thing is certain, there will be new jobs that sometimes will make us smile because they're recognized as former jobs with another fancy name, and sometimes will marvel us because we have no clue what they mean. In that respect, we'll probably feel like Matthijs van Dam when a job like offshore wind farmer would be offered to him. But I agree that these new jobs have to be learned, as the next part of the lecture called Inconvenient Truth About Lifelong Learning explains us. The dramatic technological change simply requires continuous learning. You're absolutely right there. And I love this chapter, obviously. It is a reason why universities like Nyenrode exist, by the way. And although I love learning, there must be a balance between continuous learning and personal life as well. At the end, we are still humans and not learning machines. Oh, by the way, this is the moment where I would like to say something to Yannick. I also didn't expect to talk to you, by the way. Your father just presented you a terrible idea, longer living and longer working. But I have some good news as well. So in the 18th century, most men married at the age of 25. Now it's 32 and a half. So you will live longer, work longer, but also have a longer wild party life as well. To accommodate our nature and the new needs of continuous learning, we have to think about efficiency of our learning. It can't be that we just have to mix good students with excellent teachers, get them into dialogue, and hope that they will be educated for non-existing jobs. It doesn't work that way. That's too simple. And how quickly can we actually learn? And this question can be translated into how quickly can we make neuronal connections? And with this question, we enter the relatively new field of neuroplasticity, neuroscience. And that is part of the lecture that calls for action. Here we find a wealth of ideas for individuals and organizations to enhance learning. It's a very inspiring part of your book. And it's impossible to summarize it in a few sentences. For me, personally, the notion that learning starts and ends with an individual, but always remains a social activity, is of much value. I would like to finish now. An inaugural lecture is an individual, you may say, personal activity. It's a great moment for everybody involved, but especially for the university, because after this personal start, an exciting journey follows, characterized by social activity with colleagues, students, partners, and all members of our community. It is that social learning activity in the coming years with Nick van Dam as our professor and chair of corporate learning and development that I and the university are really looking forward to. These are some of my humble observations, but he has spoken. Thank you.